to Tech Entrepreneurship. Again, I'm Aram Chavez, and we are going to jump right into it. So, where I left off, the big question, profit versus cash flow, profit versus cash flow. And the statement that I made was a pretty bold statement. Why do I absolutely despise, was the word I used, despise the word profit? And you say to yourself, that's so un-American. That's so un-Chinese. That's so un-European. No, I do despise the word profit. Why do I despise the word profit? I know I've got Richard online. Richard, can you give me any hints or ideas as to why you think I might despise profit? Anything that comes to mind. Since you are the only one on, you cannot go wrong. Why might I despise or not like the word profit at all? And this is an entrepreneurship class of all things. Too generic. That's one. That's one. And the title of today's class is Profit versus Cash Flow. Cash flow. Let's define profit first of all. Profit is an engineered number derived from subtracting your revenues, your expenses from your revenues. That number can be engineered to be good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't mean that you understand the health of the company. It doesn't mean that the company's health is good, and yet every single day you turn on the news and you hear, especially the financial news I should say, and you hear people talking about how Intel or Apple had higher profitability than expected or lower profitability and their stock took a dive, or how Intel hit their numbers or did not hit their numbers. It's a big deal, right? Profit's a big deal, and yet here I am telling you that it's an engineered number? Yes, it is. It is an engineered number. It's a number that businesses can manipulate. It's a number that businesses can manipulate. You have things in profit that you can, and in an income statement that you can engineer. Things like your depreciation. If you buy an asset, let's say I buy a car. Let's just say hypothetically I bought a Toyota Land Cruiser Extraordinaire machine. Personally, I can't, it's an expense. It just comes right out of my bank account. I can't do anything about it, right? It is what it is. But as a business, if I buy a work truck for the business, I can depreciate that work truck. Let's say I bought a $50,000 work truck. Actually, let's just say I bought a $20,000 work truck for round numbers. Let's say I bought a used $20,000 work truck, and let's just say in revenue, let's just say that somebody's making gnomes. I don't know who would make gnomes, but let's say somebody's making gnomes, and they generated $100,000 in revenue in 2012, and in 2012, they also bought a $20,000 work truck. And the useful life of this work truck is 5 years. They can take a straight line depreciation method, meaning that they will take $20,000 divided by 5 gives you $4,000, and you can subtract that from the $100,000 income that you made. thus manipulating your profit. Or you can accelerate that and take almost all of that $20,000 in income, $20,000 in truck expense, and deduct that against your revenues, giving you an $80,000 tax base. Do you see how profit can be engineered? Profit can be manipulated. And here's another thing about profit. Profit doesn't pay the bills. Let's say that I'm some kind of gnome maker. I'm making gnomes, and I get a big order from Walmart. No, not Walmart, because I would never sell at Walmart. Not necessarily true. When they come knocking, you never know. It's easy to say until they knock on the door. Walgreens. Thank you, Roberto. So Walgreens gives me an order. They want to buy 1,000, we'll call them Shalom gnomes, my hypothetical Jewish gnome. Or nombres, my hypothetical Hispanic gnome. So let's say they want to buy 1,000 of nombres. Are they going to pay me today? No. I'm going to ship them. I'm going to charge them for the shipment. They're going to land in their DC, and their DC is their distribution center. And they're going to say, we'll pay you 30 days net or 45 days net, whatever it's going to be. But I'm going to take it because it's 1,000 gnomes that I have not sold before. So I'm going to go to the accountant and I'm going to say, you're not going to believe this. We just sold 1,000 gnomes. And let's just say I sold them at 20 bucks a piece. That's $20,000. And we're going to be doing victory laps. And then I'm going to say, okay, you know what I got to do? I got to buy some more equipment. I've got to purchase some more raw materials. I may have to hire somebody. Oh, and payroll's due on Friday. That's tomorrow. Okay, so I got to hire a couple more people, and I'm thinking I got to get into a bigger space, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, okay, let's do this. Talking to my bookkeeper, my accountant, and they say, well, wait a minute, Aaron, wait. I don't think you want to slow down. I said, well, wait a minute. We just sold 1,000 gnomes. We're profitable, right? Yeah, Aaron, you are profitable. There's no question. Okay. Well, what gives? Well, Aaron, the money isn't in the bank. I'm profitable, but the money isn't in the bank? No, you don't have the cash in the bank. They haven't paid us. They're not paying us for 30 to 45 days. Profit doesn't mean anything in this case, does it? I can't go and buy more raw materials. I can't hire more people. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make payroll tomorrow. Profit is an engineered number, and it's also a misleading number. And it's also the number that you hear. It's the phrase du jour on Wall Street. Did they hit their profits? Liquid versus cash. That's absolutely right, Richard. Liquidity versus cash. And instead of cash, I'm going to take it one step further, Richard, because you're right on the cusp here. We're talking about cash flow. I prefer cash flow instead of profit. So, what have we taken away from profit? Number one, it's an engineered number. You can depreciate or amortize things against your revenue. And number two, the accountant may tell you that you're profitable based on a sale that you just had, but until the money hits the bank, you don't have that cash to spend. You don't have that cash to grow. What we want to concentrate on in entrepreneurship is cash flow. Cash flow pays the bills. Cash flow keeps you alive. As Richard said, cash flow keeps you liquid. And liquidity is a really big deal when it comes to operating a small startup, or a startup in general, I should say. Profit versus cash flow. Now, that's why profit is a bad word in my myopic view. Now, believe me, once it hits the bank and I can say we're profitable knowing that the money's in the bank, I'm all smiles. But let's take it a step further. Let's take it a step further. In the first class, I brought up a subject. I broached a subject, and it was regarding why most businesses that start up, why most startup businesses fail. Why do most startup businesses fail? Within the first 2 years, something like 80% of all startup businesses fail within the first 2 years. Is it because they don't work hard enough, they're not smart enough, they don't get it, they're in the wrong marketplace, they're incompetent? Why is it that 80% of all businesses in the United States fail in the first 2 years? I think the majority of the reason is because of working capital or lack of it. I'm going to show you an illustration of working capital in a minute. But before I get to that illustration, I want to share with some of you my own personal experience as it relates to growth. Growth personally as an individual and growth as a business, or growth in a relationship with another individual or groups of individuals. It's been my empirical experience that growth is a step function. Growth is a step function. Do not forget this term. Growth is a step function. You know, this is one of those phrases that if you get it wrong on the quiz, I'm going to come to your house and I am going to sit there with you all summer long, just like Mr. Hand did in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Some of you may not have any idea what that movie is, but beware that this right here, growth is a step function, is a term that you need to remember, not just for this class, but for life in general. Now, let me show you what we did a little bit last week. So last week we talked about the product life cycle. And, you know, there are all these phases. And this was the product life cycle curve. Very parabolic, very sharp, very clear. This is the growth. This is your launch phase or your introduction phase, acceptance, market acceptance phase, etc. Your growth, maturity, decline, etc. But look at this. Look at this. This is your revenues right here. You see, you start off with 0, and then you slowly move up. Well, there's no growth, there's no step function here. I'm not seeing any steps, Aaron. This is a very nice parabolic line. And in the academic world, we love smooth parabolic lines. We love smooth parabolic lines. What's the real world like? Real world can be jagged, up, down, backwards, sideways, to the right, to the left. It's not so smooth, is it? Even if it's going upward, it's not so smooth. Growth is a step function. No question about it. And I'm going to illustrate to you the step function. This is your break-even graph. Okay? This is your break-even graph. And the y-axis, or I'm sorry, the x-axis is going to be time. Year 1, 2, 3, 4. The y-axis, we're going to say that's revenue. Now, in this last graph, if we overlay this, you'll see that we have a very nice parabolic line. The reality of it is that if this is your revenue line, growth is a step function. It's not this beautiful parabolic line. And here's something else. It's not always going to go up. Sometimes you make mistakes and you think no matter what, you think in your heart of hearts that the decision you just made was the right one. There's no question in your mind, only to find out a month later, or a week later, or a year later, it was absolutely the wrong one. So oftentimes, you start a business, and your first step is down. And sometimes you think that you move backwards. Not really possible, but sometimes you think you did. And then you got to go forward again, and you got to make another mistake, and the next thing you know, you're just barely getting back on track. You see how growth is a step function, but it can go any way. It can go any way. Now, this is our break-even graph, so I'm going to talk to you about working capital. This blue line here is sales. Sales is sales the same thing as revenue? Is sales the same thing as revenue? Yes, they are. Sales and revenue are the same. Now, you just started up your business, you're right here. You're right there. You just started your business, and you made some pretty good decisions. But you know that 80% of businesses fail within the first 2 years. And you know that it's because they don't account for the expenses that you're going to incur, and they expect the business to pay for itself within the first couple of months. And that's not the way the world works. I would guess that only about 20% of all businesses would fail if they would account for working capital. So these are your expenses, and they go up. And boom, right here, that X marks the spot. That's break even. And then your expenses will track below your sales. You need to stay alive to get to year 2. And the way you do that is through working capital. Working capital is the money that you have saved, very much like you save in a banking account, your checking, your savings account. If an emergency comes up, you still have money to pay the bills. In a business, it's no different, yet people start businesses without any working capital, without any savings, so that they can pay bills until they hit break even. And at that break even point, they become cash flow positive. I don't know if you can read that. They become cash flow positive. This area right here, in between year 2 and when you started in year 2, this whole area right here, this square or rectangle I just drew, that's the Valley of Death, or Death Valley. If you don't make it out of here, your business is done. How many of you have seen a business that looked like it was doing so well? It was always busy. Things are going so well, very customer-oriented, great product, great service, whatever. And the next thing you know, within a couple of years, they've shut their doors, and you say to yourself, wow, wait a minute, what happened? I thought they had such a good going concern. What is it that happened? Most likely, they didn't account for working capital. They didn't account for those 2 years that you need to be alive, that you need to feed your business. You got to get to break even so you can get to cash flow positive. And you notice, you can be profitable in the Valley of Death, but you need to be cash flow positive in order for me to take you seriously. I don't want to know what your profits are. I want to know if that money's in the bank. You know, that's why Wall Street took some serious dives in 2008, 2009. Everybody was focused on the income statement, and they were balance sheet issues, and we'll get into this in the semester so as to not to confuse you early on. But a lot of people were just focused on profits, right? They weren't focused on the balance sheet, the debt side, where your real assets are and where your liabilities are. They were looking at the numbers, and the numbers are engineered. Profits are engineered. It's cash flow that we need to be concentrating on. This is your break-even chart. This should be a map that you use forever. Remember that growth is a step function. There's no beautiful parabolic line in the real world. Growth isn't some beautiful, oh boy, I wish it was. I wish it was. It's more like this. Up, down, or you can even go backwards. How many of you have made mistakes and have had to take a couple of steps back to go forward? It's the same in business. And I'm here to tell you that business isn't complicated. We like to make it more complicated than it is. It's all about how quickly you can get to break even and cash flow positive. You got to get out of Death Valley. I want you to keep this close to you. I want you to keep this close to you because this is going to save you. When you get involved in a startup, when you get involved in your own business, your own going concern, I want you to look at this and say, okay, well, I might not have 2 years of cash, but I'm going to have to raise that money. I'm going to have to get that money from somewhere. And where is it that the money comes from? Where is it that the money comes from in order for you to break even? Where does the money come from? Robert, can I get some paper, please? Thank you. Where does the money come from? If you don't have 2 years of working capital, where are you going to go? Thank you. Well, I'll tell you. Call it the 4S. The founders, which would be you, or your partners. That's where the money is going to come from. Family, friends, and fools. That's where the money comes from. You're going to need that money to get to break even. Friends, family, and fools. And your own savings. And that's the reality of it. Because only 2% of all startups are funded by venture capitalists. Only 2%. 2%? And they expect me to be successful? Yes, heck yes, we do. We demand it. And in the U.S., I would say 70 to 80% of our U.S. GDP, probably 70, 75% of our U.S. GDP comes from small to medium-sized enterprises. People are doing it. That's a huge number. 70% of our GDP comes from startups. Well, they're no longer startups, but they're small to medium-sized enterprises. So in order for you to get here, you're going to have to go to the 4S. Primarily friends, family, and fools. That's true. That is true. Now, these expenses here. I don't care if you're Intel, I don't care if you're Apple Computers, GE, whoever, Coca-Cola. I don't care if you're running a paleta stand on the street or a taco shop down the street. I don't care what it is. There are 3 primary expenses every business has, and only 3. Now, a lot of expenses will be rolled up underneath that and categorized, but there are 3 primary expenses. You see here how I have the expense line? And it's above the revenue line. Here you break even, where you got your revenues and expenses, and now you're making money. You got it in the bank. You're broken even. And you become cash flow positive. Well, there are 3 expenses that you need to be aware of. Three primary expenses. COGS, labor, and overhead, OH. Somebody tell me what COGS are. What are COGS? Does anybody know what COGS are? Here we go. What are COGS? Cost of goods sold. That's right. They're cost of goods sold. And let me simplify this for you because I like simplicity. If it's complicated, it confuses me and I don't want anything to do with it. Cost of goods sold are just your raw inputs. They're your raw materials. They're your raw inputs. If I'm making hypothetically gnomes, I may have some poly resin, paint, packaging, stuffing for the packaging, et cetera, et cetera. Those are my raw inputs. Those are my raw materials. You also have labor. That's another input. Labor can be both salaried and hourly. Overhead. Overhead, things like rent. Now, here's what I want you to glean. I really want you to understand this. These are the 3 primary expenses every business has. Again, I don't care if you're riding a bike, you know, and you're selling paletas, or if you're at Intel. These are your 3 primary expenses, but here's the key. Some of these are fixed, and some of these are variable. Which one of these 3 is a variable expense? Which one of these 3 is a variable expense? Anyone? Which one of these 3 is a variable expense? And what do I mean by variable? Well, let's say I have a paleta stand, which are, you know, Mexican popsicles, right? And I got my refrigerator on my bike, I'm riding around. Well, in the summertime, June, July, August, I'm going to sell a lot more ice cream than I am in October, November, December. And so every month, my variable expenses are going to change. That's what variable is, it's change. My expenses are going to vary every month. I might sell even more popsicles in July than I did in June. So every month I'm going to have to be buying a different amount of inputs. Every month I'm going to have to be acquiring a different amount of ice cream or popsicles. So under variable, COGS are variable. Your raw materials are variable. Over here, your overhead is typically fixed. Rent, insurance. I mean, typically these numbers are relatively stagnant. The variable expenses are somewhat of a moving target. Now, labor can be both fixed and variable, because you have hourly employees and you have salaried employees. So labor can be a little bit of both. Here's a question that I have for all of us online today. Which one of these, variable or fixed, do you want? Do you want more fixed or more variable expenses? You want more fixed or more variable expenses? Kevin says fixed. All right. Where did Richard go? Looks like we have yet again formed a quorum. Fixed. And we're going to wait for Moffelman. Fixed, okay. Well, and fixed is right, because you can control them. You understand what they are. You know what they are every single month. They are not going to vary. Imagine if with your own personal life, every single month, you didn't know how much your rent was going to be. Next month, it could be, $1,000 more, your mortgage. It could be $500 more. It could be, you can't predict your future if you're variable, if your expenses are all over the place. So you want more fixed expenses, meaning you've got to try to get as many of your variable expenses into the fixed column. You've got to try to predict better every single month your variable and expenses, because you can predict your fixed expenses for the most part. And I'm here to tell you that variable expenses, the less control you have over them, the less efficient you are. And yet, strangely enough, very small companies, startup companies, this is where we have the biggest problem. We have the biggest problem managing variable expenses. It's tough. It's tough because we don't have all the time in the world to spend on being efficient. We should be spending most of our time doing what? According to this last Tuesday, what should we be spending 80+% of our time on? What should we be spending 80+% of our time on? Exactly, Kevin, exactly. So that leaves very little time, and what should we be doing with the rest of that 20%? What should we be doing with the rest of that 20%? we should probably look at putting it into R&D, innovation. You're spending 80% of your time marketing, guerrilla marketing, and 20% of your time, probably like 15% of your time in R&D, and then the rest just in the operations. So that leaves you very little time to actually control these variable expenses, and yet here I am telling you that this is huge. This is a big part of reasons why companies fail, because they can't control their variable expenses. They don't know how much they're paying for things. Let me tell you something. That statement right there is so true. I can't tell you how many restaurants I've talked to, and they say to me, Aram, I don't know how much it costs to make a pizza. I know how much I sell it for. I know exactly how much I sell it for, but I can't get a grip on how much COGS, labor, and overhead go into making one piece of pizza. I know I'm making a little bit of money, but I can't tell you how much. I can't control my variable expenses either. Tell me, Aram, how much does it cost for me to make a piece of pizza, or a pizza, period? Startup businesses and small businesses, this is your pain. It's so interesting. Here we are talking about spending most of your time with marketing and sales because that's what keeps you alive. And then in the same breath, I'm telling you, or the next class, I'm telling you, you need to control your variable expenses because those are what's going to eat you up. You got to get control of them. And yet, you're only supposed to devote 5% of your time to being efficient? Yes. Because you got to get to that break-even point. But how can I get to that break-even point? It's a whole chicken and egg. Hey, Aram, how can I get to the whole break-even point if I don't have any time to become more efficient? How do I get to the break-even point if you're telling me only 5–10% of my time can be spent on operations, on efficiency, the heart and soul of my business? It can be done. It can be done. And it is done regularly. So we know why most businesses fail. It's because of a lack of working capital. They can't get out of Death Valley here. And you need to become cash flow positive, where the business is paying for itself. So that way you're not getting money from friends, family, and fools, or founders. And we need to understand the primary expenses that businesses go through: COGS, labor, and overhead. Again, I don't care what size of business you are. But it's the variable expenses that you want to control. Now, in the world, in Aram's world, there are two oceans, two types of oceans. There's a blue ocean and there's a red ocean. There's a blue ocean and a red ocean. Those are your oceans. Now, which ocean are you in? What are these oceans, by the way, first of all? Does anybody have any idea what these oceans are? What the metaphor is that I'm about to explain? The red ocean is signified by blood in the water. Yeah, blood in the water. That's a red ocean. Red oceans are where the biggest sharks, the biggest fish, the biggest companies swim. the Coca-Colas of the world, the Disneys of the world, the GEs, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Googles, the et cetera, et ceteras. This is where they compete. This is where they compete. They compete in the red ocean. And the red ocean is all about standardization. What is standardization? What is standardization? Standardization is a one-size-fits-all. It's efficiency. And we're going to call this efficiency burn. Red ocean companies are all about efficiency burn. They're all about standardization. They're all about the mass markets. Mainstream. All things to all people. They have plenty of time to become efficient. They have plenty of time and money and resources. They have in the red ocean two things the blue ocean doesn't have. They have resources. They have money, and they have people. They have money and they have people. The blue ocean is all about customization. The blue ocean is all about customization. Customizing your good. And instead of efficiency burn, it's intimacy burn. You want your customer to feel that intimate connection that you have created between your product, your service, and them. And it's niche oriented. It's the niche. It's not the mass market. It's the niche. The blue ocean is all about the niche. And what you don't have is money. And what you don't have is people. And you say, well, that doesn't seem very fair. Seems like all of the good stuff is on the red side. Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Sure, they have money. Sure, they have people. Sure, they're looking at a larger market. But let's take an example of pizza. I'm a big fan of, but there's a local pizza place here in town called Grimaldi's. And they not only have really good pizza, but they have phenomenal cheesecake. And I think I remember telling you guys that, hint, 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 I love pastries. So, do you think their pizza, Grimaldi's, it's a very, very custom type pizza? Do you think their pizza is less or more expensive than, say, Domino's? It's very expensive. That's right, guys. I'm sure that's what you're saying. It's very expensive as it relates to pizza. And yet you say, wait a minute, they don't have Domino's money or Papa John's money. How do they compete? How does Grimaldi's compete with Papa John's, which is just in the same strip mall? How does Grimaldi's compete with Papa John's? That doesn't make any sense. You mean I got to compete with somebody in the red ocean that's got money and that has resources? And you expect me to win? Absolutely, and you'll win every single time. Because people always pay more for customization. I mean, let me ask you this. Yeah, it's niche pizza, that's right. Let me ask you this. Does any of you online here, have you ever paid and will you ever pay in your life going forward more for something because it is tailored to your taste or to your liking? That could be a car. That could be a pizza. That could be clothes. That could be a pen. That could be anything. Will any of you ever pay more for something, or are you always going to order a Coca-Cola? Will you ever in your entire life order something that isn't so standard? And do you expect to pay more for it? Yes. Will you ever ask the bartender to make you a Shirley Temple? Richard? Yes, of course. He just probably did. I know Richard, so I can say that, and I'm just giving him a hard time. But Richard will order something custom from somewhere at some point in his life multiple times, as will I, as will Kevin, as will Meffelman, etc. Yes, and there you go, Richard. Quality. You're also paying for more quality, right? Will you pay more to have custom jeans, maybe? Or maybe it's just that you like the cotton from a different manufacturer. Maybe you're not, and it's not that you're being pretentious, it's just, hey, I like to, when I wear my undershirts, I like a higher grade of cotton. Nobody ever sees that undershirt, but I like a higher grade of cotton, so I pay more for it. Or I could just go out and buy the standard undershirt, right? And I'm going to pay less for it. There are all sorts of things, all sorts of blue oceans. The key is, here's the key to success in a startup. Number one, you don't try to compete in the red ocean. Grimaldi's is not trying to sell 50,000 pizzas in an hour. Grimaldi's isn't trying to buy the cheapest cheese on the marketplace and throw it on your pizza. Grimaldi's isn't trying to hire the cheapest, lowest wage type employees. No, they're not. You know what Grimaldi said? They said, look, you know what? We can't compete with Domino's. We don't even want to compete with Domino's. We're not in that red ocean. We can make money another way. And you can make money in the niche market. You can make a lot of money in the niche market. Case in point, Apple computers. Their computers account for roughly 11% of all computers sold in the world. That's a small percentage considering all of the computers. That's a niche market. Do they make money in the computer industry game? Yes, they do. All day. Now, granted, that's a much larger market, but you see, they're not trying to compete with Dell. They're pricing their product much higher. They are in the competition with Dell, don't get me wrong. Just like Grimaldi's is in competition with Domino's. But I'm here to tell you that you can separate yourself in quality, as Richard stated. You can separate yourself in terms of service. You can separate yourself in terms of taste. You want to find a blue pond. You want to find a blue ocean or a blue pond that you can swim in, where you don't have to worry about big sharks. You're the biggest fish in your own pond. Because what happens is, and this is what I see all day long, I see this every single day. I see companies that come up with a great idea or a great concept, and what do? They compare themselves to a red ocean company, and they say, you know, well, Coca-Cola sells a can of Coke for $1. Or what is it, 50 cents or whatever it is. And so I have my own pop. It tastes better, and I hand make it myself. I've got all the, all the equipment. I'm making it out of my house, my garage, whatever. And this cola is just so much better than Coca-Cola. And I think that in order for me to compete with them, I'm going to have to price my product at 50 cents. But it cost me like 45 cents to make. And they do this for years. They will go about playing in a red ocean where they have no business as a startup, instead of saying, wait a minute, you know what? I've got something really unique, and because of its unique factor, uniqueness, if you will, I need to be pricing myself at a higher price point because I'm more customized. I am not all things to all people. I don't want everyone to love me. Do you think Grimaldi's wants everybody to go to their store? They have a specific target market. They don't want everybody, because not everybody can afford their pizza. They went high because in the price spectrum, because that is where they play. They play in customized pizza. Same thing with Apple. Apple computers, Apple phones, whatever. Initially, the Apple phone in 2007 was priced at $600 or $700 for that first Apple phone. It was totally different. No one had ever created a phone. Well, there was some people before them that had created the touch screen, but they were the first company to really do it in a big way, and they priced themselves accordingly. And then as you saw the market saturate with smartphones and touchscreen phones, their pricing has done what? It's come down, and they compete with other red ocean companies, and you hear every single day about Samsung and Apple. Every single day you read about Samsung and Apple battling it out in the trenches. Every single day. There is not a day that goes by that you cannot read on Yahoo or whatever news service you use, CNN, whatever news service you subscribe to, that they are not battling. There are articles right now being written about Samsung and Apple battling in the phone market. Quality over quantity. There you go. Again, Richard, 100% correct. You start competing with red ocean companies, and guess what? That's exactly what they want. Coca-Cola wants you to compete with them because they know just like well, let's just say they just know that they have what you don't, money and resources. They know that it's just a matter of time before you go out of business because you think that you have to play in their game because that's their customers are your customers, and that's not true. Somebody asked me a question, maybe it was last semester. They said, "Well, Aaron, I have a pest control business. How do I differentiate myself? I mean, there's a million pest control companies out there. I got to price myself accordingly, or else people are just going to choose, the next person." I said, okay, but you need to play in a blue pond. You need to find what that blue pond is. I said, while you're outside spraying for bugs, why don't you also offer a service to spray for weeds? Boom, there you go. Your blue pond, you found it. You have now separated yourself. You do not want to be all things to all people. You're looking for a specific clientele. Grimaldi's, Apple, they are looking for a specific clientele that likes quality, isn't looking to just feed themselves. They're looking to taste it. They have more of an appreciation for it, and every single one of us buys in the blue pond every single day. Every single day we buy in the blue pond. Any questions? Any comments thus far? Now, at some point, we are always looking for, in terms of sales, we need to spend about 80% of our time on sales, right? Well, that means two things. Number one, retaining customers. And number two, gaining new customers. Now, this is a somewhat a bad picture. What is that? Maybe I should do the other side. What are those? Those are feet. Can't you tell? Come on. Throw me a bone. Give me a break. They're feet. And they're beautiful feet. They're almost identical to my feet. When it comes to gaining new customers, thanks, Mappleman, I appreciate it. When it comes to gaining new customers, it's all about the footprint. And you want to, and when we're talking about retaining new customers and gaining new customers, it's about market share. You want to get more and more market share. And the footprint is all about market share. And what I want you to do is constantly be thinking about expanding your footprint. Expanding the footprint, meaning you're getting more customers. No one customer accounts for more than 20% of your revenue. But in the beginning, you're going to have customers that are going to be 80% of your revenue on a monthly basis. But you got to continue to build that customer base so that no one customer accounts for more than 20% and eventually 10% of your revenues. And you've diversified your risk. And you have got more customers to subscribe to your product or service. Any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? This next class, next Tuesday, I'm going to be talking about how you compete against red ocean companies. What do you need to do? I'm going to take a little bit more of a deep dive. So bring your scuba gear. Now, tomorrow's quiz will be uploaded. The quiz is going to be uploaded at 11:59 p.m. or 12 a.m. Saturday morning. And it will be due at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday evening. 11:59 p.m. on Sunday evening. It'll be available tomorrow night or Saturday morning, 12 a.m., 11:59 p.m. Friday night. And we went over a lot of stuff. So if you have questions, you have comments, you email me, you text me, you call me on Saturday or Sunday or Monday. If you're working, I'm working. So let me know. And if there are no more questions or comments, I'll leave it open for a couple of minutes for any Q&A. And Richard spilled his Shirley Temple, Roberto, on his notes. When are the notes going to be available? Today. I'll have them out for you later tonight. You guys are great. Anything else? Kevin, I know that you're going to be going out of town. We got to somehow make sure that you get that in. And if there's anything I can do to help out, let me know. With that said, thanks. I'll be taking my laptop to Hawaii. Thanks. I knew it was a vacation. I knew it. I wish I was going with you. In Kona. Oh man, am I jealous. I'm going to have to give Kevin more work. That's all there is to it. We got to equalize this out somehow. No, I'm just kidding. All right, over and out. I will see you guys same time, same channel, 1 p.m. Tuesday, room 220 Santan. Over and out. Adios.